Every app you've built in SwiftUI keeps data in memory, but once you close it, it's gone. Today we're going to fix that by learning File I/O, how to save, and how to load data using Foundation. So we're going to be creating another simple notes app. Let's do a little hello world. Go ahead and save it. And let's say we make some changes. We can even load our old save. We can reveal where it's being saved on our Mac, as well as save as, which is going to allow us to save it on our computer. If I want to save this as hello world note in our documents, we can see here I have my txt file, and there we are, the hello world. So this is going to be part of a YouTube course. YouTube courses are essentially like playlists, but they allow you to track progress and your learning. First part of this course is going to be all about saving using macOS. So if you want to learn how to use SwiftUI and macOS together, this is the course for you. For saving, we're going to be covering File I/O today. Then in the next video, JSON File I/O, followed by Swift Data with macOS, then Swift Data searching on macOS, so filtering, queries, etc. So this is going to be our goal of what we're building today. So if you're curious on how we got from 0 to here, let's go ahead and dive on in. So before we get started, you will need a Mac, and you'll also want Xcode to be installed on that Mac. It is available completely for free from the Apple App Store, so make sure you have Xcode installed and good to go. We're going to be creating a new project for our Notes app. Now, when you first create a new project, you'll have this little window pop up asking you to choose a template for your new project. Because this series focuses on macOS, we're going to go to the macOS tab, then the app, which should be the first option. You can also search for it under the filter. So once you have app, you can press next. The product name is going to be the name of the project. If you're planning on turning this to a full-blown app, I suggest picking your app name now, but you can always change it when you do upload to the App Store. So I'm going to call this one Notes macOS Course. For the team, you can either select this as none or the developer account that's been set up and signed in on your Mac. If you don't have one yet, you should be able to create one completely for free. There is a paid tier, but for our purposes, free should be all that you need. For the interface, we're going to make sure it's on SwiftUI. For the language, Swift. And we're not going to be using testing system or storage today. Don't worry, if you don't include storage in this build, you can add it very easily later. If you add storage now, it's going to give you a much different template for ours. From there, you can choose where you want to save it. I like saving them on my desktop, but anywhere you'd want to save it, totally up to you. Okay, if this is your first time using Xcode, when your template loads, you'll have a left panel here. This is where our project navigator is. We can see our different files that are created. The first file it puts us on is the content view. This is kind of like our main environment where we're going to be focusing on displaying different elements or information to the user. The other file, most people call this the app file, and it just tells Xcode when we want to run our app to boot to the content view. There's a lot more you can do with it here, but we're not going to be coming back to this file, so just leave it as is. In the middle, we have our code editor. This is where we're going to be typing and adding our code. It should also be color-coded, and we'll be going over all the concepts once we start writing our own code. On the right side, we have a preview, so we can actually preview what this window looks like. Now, on our macOS sample app, it's pretty funny because it's given us a system image of a globe and the text hello world. But the window is just kind of expanding just to where the content is, so it looks really small. We'll be expanding our window a little bit later on. Okay, let's start coding out our Notes app. So we're going to be getting rid of our placeholders here, but we can keep the information within the VStack. You can use the braces to tell which kind of section you're in. So if you double click on the left side of one of the braces, it'll tell you all the code it encapsulates. So we can see here we have a content view, a variable body sum view, and a VStack. VStack just allows us to organize any information from top to bottom. It is ran sequentially, so anything at the top of the VStack will be shown before anything that comes after it. When we're working in SwiftUI, we can actually create states in order to hold our variables. So if I do a state private var, to basically say, hey, I want to create a variable that I want to keep track of, so whenever it updates, our view will refresh. We also need to give it a name. So I'm going to call this one note text, and we're going to have it equal an empty string. Strings hold text and they're represented by the quotation marks. If we wanted to have a different default, we could put something like hello, Otherwise, I don't want my note text to really have anything. I want it to start off completely blank. Okay, within our VStack, we're going to allow the users to type in text, and we're going to connect the variable to the text that's being shown and changed within the text editor. We can do so by typing out text editor, and we can actually use the autofill as we're typing to select what we want. In this case, I'm going to be selecting the one with the text, and it's asking us for a binding. Essentially, it's wanting a variable that's going to be updated. Well, lucky for us, we've already made one. We need to put the $sign and then note text to signify that these two pieces, the text editor and the variable, are going to have a connection. They're going to be talking back and forth. We can then apply some properties by going to the following line underneath the text editor and pressing period. This is going to give us a whole list of options of what we can do and change within our text editor. For me, I'm going to be adding a border, and I'm going to be setting the color of the border within the argument brackets to be gray. I'll then also include a frame where we can add a width, height, one or the other. So for me, I'm going to do the height of 200. So we're going to have a more static height for our notes. We can also add other stacks, and we can even add stacks within stacks. So I'm going to add an H stack, which allows us to have things be organized horizontally from left to right. Let's add some buttons. Within the argument brackets of the buttons, we can choose what it's going to display. So in this case, save. I'm then going to add a brace, and this is where we can add the execution. So whenever the user presses the button, what's going to happen? Well, I'm going to have it save a note. Now this is a reference to a function that unfortunately does not exist, so we'll get an error, but I'm just setting it up for now. Let's also have another button for load. We're going to add our argument braces and load note. Again, unfortunately, it's a function we have yet to create, but it'll all come together eventually. You'll also notice why we have an error. Our preview won't be able to refresh. We need to solve those errors before we can update our preview or run our app. One more thing we're going to add is actually a variable, but this isn't one that we're going to be updating or changing, to have a file URL. We want to be able to save this somewhere on our Mac. So we'll create a variable and we'll call it file URL. This is going to then conform with the colon to a URL. So we're going to establish a manager, and this is going to allow us to provide access to the app sandbox file locations. It's going to equal the file manager, and I always recommend whenever there's autofill, definitely use that. It helps you not make mistakes. So by setting it to default, this is going to just provide to the very default locations. We can then establish a docs, which is going to equal the manager.urls. We're going to select the for and in autofill. The for is going to be the dot. We can see we have a ton of different options. I'm going to choose the document directory. The in, I'm going to select as the .user domain mask. This is essentially the app scoped document directory. Inside the brackets, we're going to do dot first, and we're going to force unwrap it with exclamation point. We're saying this URL exists, trust me, bro. Then we're going to do a return the docs.append path component. This is going to return a URL by appending the selected path component that conforms to a uniform type identifier. Within the string name here, we're going to just be passing through the notes.txt. And we don't need the conforming to, so we can go ahead and get rid of that. Essentially, we're going to be adding it to that URL path, and we're saving it as notes. And then the txt says, hey, this is going to be a text file. So essentially appending our file name. Okay, we now want to write our functions to save now that we have a URL and to load. I like to put my functions, if we look at our structure content of a view, I like to put them right before the last brace. So any of my variables go in the top and any of my functions go at the bottom. You can create a function by using the func or func keyword. We'll then use save note, and we can choose within the parameters if any information is going to be required. In this case, it's not. Then whatever is going to be happening goes between the braces. We can use the do block in order to say, hey, I want you to try to do something, and then we'll include a catch for any weird errors. So we'll do try note text, and then we're going to be doing the dot write, and I'm going to choose the first autofill here, where we want to be able to write to the contents of the URL. Well, that's why we had created that file URL from before. For automatically, we can set this to be true, and for the encoding, we can choose what we want. I'd suggest doing the UTF-8 encoding. Whenever that's been successful, we'll go ahead and print to the console, note has been saved. And then outside of the braces of the do, we're going to add a catch. So if any shenanigans or funny business happens, we can figure out why. I like to do failed to save and then include the error.localize descriptions. So we'll add a comma and then error.localize description. This will give us some clues as to what may have gone wrong. Okay, we have our function of note. So underneath that save note, we'll create another function of loading the note. Nothing within the parameters, but we'll add the braces. We're once again going to be having a manager, and this is going to just be our FileManager.default again. We just have it here to check to see if the file already exists first. So we can create an if statement, so we can only attempt to read it if a saved note is present, because otherwise we can't load something that doesn't exist. So we'll use our if manager, and then we'll have our file exists at path. Well, we have the file URL we've created before, and then we can do the dot path to grab that path address. Outside of the brackets, we'll add a brace. So if that file exists, well, we can use our do once more, and we'll have our note text equal the try of string. And from here, we're going to have our contents of and encoding. Well, we want the contents of the file URL to load, whatever that saved note was when we're loading it. And for the encoding, we'll once again be using the UTF-8, essentially populating the editor with any of the saved content. It's a good idea while you're building your program to include any print statements. So we can say loaded from file, and we can use string interpolation by doing the slash, then our brackets, looking at the file URL.last path component. Whenever we have the do, we can even see we have an error here. Error throws are not handled. We can go ahead and include our catch or any of those errors. And from here, we can just use our print once again, and we can say load failed. And if you really want to, you could even put this in string interpolation as well for your error.localize description. So you could do it one of two ways. Okay, and we have our if, and if we go to the end of the if, we can include an else. So what happens if we want to load the file, but the file doesn't exist? Well, we can just say that the no save file is found yet. Now we're printing this in a final app. You'd probably want a little toast message that kind of pops up and says, hey, can't load anything if you haven't saved it yet. I think that's also cool is, let's say we do have something saved, and every time we want to open up the app, we get the previous note we were working on. We can go to the end of our VStack after the padding, and we can add the dot on up here. And this is how we can actually run code whenever a view appears. So whenever we navigate to the screen or whenever it pops up, maybe we ran the application. I'm going to remove the brackets and instead add braces. Within here, we can say, okay, whenever something appears, I want an action or a function to happen. So I'm going to run our load note. So this will give the appearance of whenever someone saves something and reopens our app, it'll appear and load that note. If nothing exists, we'll just get a little print in our console that says, hey, no note, but that's totally fine. So we don't have any errors. Let's go ahead and run our application. At the top, you can see any devices you can run to. In the case of my Mac, well, I can just run it on my own machine. We can also use the preview if we'd like. So let's go ahead and run our app by pressing the play button in the top left. If you have any errors, you'll get information as to why, but we're all good to go. All right, and here is our app. It looks pretty similar to the one in our canvas, although now the load button has appeared. So in the bottom right of Xcode, there's this little box, and when you hover over it, it says hide the debug area or even show the debug area. Then the right panel also needs to be selected so you can see the console logs. So from here, we can show or hide the console, and we can see when our app booted up, we got the no save file is found yet. If you remember from our load, it's happening whenever the view appears. And if there's no file that exists, we get that little print message. All right, let's go ahead and try to save something. So I'm just going to do Swift is awesome. We'll press save. Note has been saved. If we go ahead and add more text, and we want to load from when we had last saved, maybe we made some mistakes, we can press load, and it grabs the previous version. Even delete it, load it. We have that version is now saved. We have that version that's been saved and we can load back to it. So you've essentially added local saving to your app, which is pretty cool. So as a note, on macOS, the app sandbox can block writes outside your app container unless you adjust any entitlements. For local projects, saving in documents is perfectly fine. Let's also give the users an option to see a little temporary saved message whenever they've saved. Whenever you're done testing with an app, don't press on the X button. Instead, go into Xcode and press on the square. That'll safely kill the app that's running. Okay, let's create a private variable for the saved message that we can display. So we're going to create a state private var under our note text, and we'll call it save message. Always a good idea to kind of have things be named so you can reference them later if that makes sense to you or other developers. Then we're going to scroll down to our save note and we can add some code to update the save message. So before the print, but after our try, we'll have our save message and we'll have it equal a string value of saved. We want it to be text, and that's what strings are used for. Then we can have a little bit of a delay. We can do so with the dispatch queue. .main.async after, let's see, async after, there we go. For the deadline, we want to choose, okay, when is this going to happen? Well, I want it to happen maybe 2 seconds after, so we'll do now plus 2. I don't need anything within the execute, so we'll just go ahead and delete that. Outside of those brackets, though, we will add a brace, and we'll have our save message be cleared. So after 2 seconds, it'll go from saved to just an empty string. And what we can actually do is in the catch, instead of our print error, although if you do want to keep it, you totally can, we can have our save message equal the save failed. And what we can do is after, or I guess under our buttons, we can display the text of save message. So after our H stack, let's have some text. We're going to be looking at the variable of save message. Now keep in mind, we don't need to do the binding because we're not going to be updating or changing or having these things talk to another. It's just displaying whatever it is at any given time. We can even add some styling, so we can add a font of maybe caption and even a foreground style, so we can change the color of the text. I'm going to set this to be green. And we can even add a quick little animation of, let's do ease in out. And that animation is going to play based on the value whenever that changes for the save message. Let's go ahead and give it a test. Okay, we can see when we loaded up our app, we had the previous version just automatically show. I'm going to go ahead and delete this and just say new version. We'll press the save button. We get this little green saved. There we go. That is pretty cool. So we get a little bit of user feedback. It pops up after 2 seconds, kind of fades away. So that is the very, very basics and the core of File I/O in Swift. We've created something that saves, a little bit of user feedback. But if you're like me, you're thinking, man, where the heck is this? If I go on my documents, I don't actually see where this is. I thought you said we were saving it to the documents. Well, we're actually saving it to the app sandbox documents. It's located a little bit differently. Because this isn't a production app, we have to have little spaces to where our test apps can save and access things. So what if we just tried to print the file URL.path? Let's say on up here, we can do a print statement, and I want to look at the file URL.path. So we can see where our path is. So it's under users, whatever your Mac name is, library containers, your build identifier, and then data documents note. It's definitely not found in our normal documents. We can actually copy this if we'd like. Then in Finder, you can right click, go to folder, and it should pop open a little Finder window. We can actually paste that URL and hit return. Then we can find out where exactly it is. And if we open it, we can definitely see our note. See, we have our new version. Let's go ahead and improve the usability of this app a little bit more, because if we're having people save files, especially if they think it's going to their documents, they're probably not going to be looking at that URL. No way, no how. Let's create another function. For this function, we want it to have that little window that appears that's like save as. So let's go ahead and create a function for save as. This is something that a lot of apps use, so users can actually choose where to save the notes. This keeps things sandbox friendly while also allowing to save to standard folders like documents, downloads, even your desktop. But before we do that, we have a little bit of housekeeping. Under the import, we're going to be adding two more imports. The first one is going to be AppKit, and the second one is going to be uniform type identifiers. This is going to improve the usability of our app and allow us to access some extra features. Okay, before the very last brace, we're going to be creating our new function. Let's create a function and call it save note as. Nothing within the parameters, and we're going to be adding our brace. We'll then create a panel. And this panel is going to equal an NS save panel. This is a panel that provides that prompt for user information about where to save it. This is something that's kind of already been built in for us. We're going to add the empty brackets. We can then customize the panel by doing the panel and then dot. So let's customize the title. And we can say save note as. Then we'll have the panel.name field string value. So this is a user editable file name. So if they want to save it as my note, cool note, whatever they'd like. But we can also provide it with a fallback. Let's do new note. This way, whenever they open it up, it'll just say new note. If you have a maybe title parameter, you can pass through that value as default. Then we can have a panel.allows content type. There we go. For this one, we can choose the different types. So if you had an app that maybe was saving images, maybe you can allow PNG, JPEG, etc. For us, since we're using text, we're just going to be having it still within the square brackets, which represents a list. Even if we just have one thing, we're going to be doing the dot plain text, because we're going to be using that .txt text file. Then we'll have our panel.can create directories. And from here, we're going to have it equal true. Okay, we are not quite done with this one because we need a little bit more magic. Well, not really magic, but we need to write some logic to actually having a response to saving. So we can do so with the panel.begin. This is going to be the start of our logic. We'll then add a brace and we'll say response in. So we're going to be tracking that response. We can create a guard in order to make sure that we don't run into any weird funky errors. So we'll have our response and it's going to equal, so two equal signs, dot, and then in capitals, OK. Then we'll add a comma and we'll then have our URL, which is going to equal the panel.url. In any other case, we can go ahead and return. Guards are going to prevent us from having any crashes. We can then add a do. Scroll down a little bit so we can get a bit more space. And in here, we're going to try to write that note to the URL. We've already kind of created this logic with our save note. So even if you wanted to copy and paste to save a little bit of time, feel free to do so. Otherwise, it's not too bad. We'll do our try note text.write to, and we've already done this before. Gonna be looking at the URL automatically. Yep. And then for the encoding, we've been using .utf8. Then we can update our save message. So I think we had called it save message. Yep. To equal saved to Mac. Actually, we can even interpolate to the URL that's being saved to. So we'll do the URL.lastPath component. This way they know exactly where it's been saved. Then we'll add our catch. We're doing our best to handle any errors here, and we'll have our save message instead equal save failed. And if we really want to, we can tell the user as to why with our / and then our error.localize description. Cool beans. One more function I'd like to add is if they do want to access the default save, we can reveal that in Finder. So let's call it reveal in Finder. Add our braces, and we can have our manager again, which is going to equal the FileManager.default. Then we'll have our note path, which is the file URL.path, again, we're kind of just repeating a lot of concepts here. So if the file exists, we can select it in Finder. So if manager.file exists at path, well, that path is the note path. So in the case that it does exist, then we're going to use the ns workspace .shared .activate file viewer selecting. So let's see if we can find that one. Activate, yeah, definitely use the autofill for this one. And then within the brackets, it's asking us for the file URL within square braces. So we're going to add those. Within the square braces, we'll just be passing through the file URL. Okay, so if it exists, it's going to open with Finder, which is our file viewer, and it's going to be selecting that file URL so we can find exactly where it is. Outside of the if, any other case, if it doesn't exist yet, we can just open the containing documents folder. So we'll be establishing a folder URL. And this is going to be the file URL .deleting last path component. And then we're going to have our ns workspace .shared .open the folder URL, which we had just created above. Okay, we're pretty much good to go with the exception of our buttons. Where did we have our buttons? Here we go, in the H stack. We have save load, but we don't have any for our two new functions. So let's create another button, and we'll call this one save as, add our braces, and we're going to be doing our save note as. Perfect. Then our button, I believe we had it reveal in Finder. And same thing here. Okay, well, let's go ahead and run our app. Then I'll show you a better way to, well, a cooler way to add your buttons. And then we'll be all done for this video. Build succeeded, no errors, wonderful. Okay, let's go ahead and reveal in Finder first. It's gonna give us a Finder that pops up. So again, we're in that really weird documents folder found under the app specific area. There's our note.txt, perfect. Now, spoiler, we're gonna encounter a interesting error when we try to save as. Oh no, our app is completely frozen, we got an error. What gives? Well, the console log is pretty good at giving us a hint as to what may have happened. So it says unable to display the save panel. Our app has the user selected file read entitlement, but it needs user selected file read and write. So currently we can only read, but we can't write to the Mac system. Well, we can fix that really easily. If we go to our project file, so you just may need to click on the folder in your project navigator. From there, click on the little kind of hammer with Xcode. It should just be whatever the top file is, same name as your project. And you'll see that we have general, signing and capabilities. You just may need to select the target. And if we go to the signing and capabilities, and we scroll down, might be a little bit down here, it should be under App Sandbox. See here, little App Sandbox. If you don't see App Sandbox under signing and capabilities, you should be able to press the capabilities up here and then add it. Since I already have it, it's not appearing in the list, it should have already popped up. We then need to go to the file access where it says read only. We're going to change it to be read and write. If you want to go specifically to the downloads folder, by the way, you will also need to update that one. I don't plan on doing it, but we might as well update it. That will update the entitlements of the app. Let's go ahead and run it again. Okay, I'm going to make a new note. Hello, no more crashes. Then I'm going to do save as. We see our window up here. Here's our new note, which was that parameter that we had kind of given it as a default name. And I'm just going to say, hey crash, no more. You can choose where you want to save it. I'm just going to pop it in my documents, but you get the little drop down here. Save to hey crash, no more, .txt. Okay, I'm going to open up my documents. Hey crash, no more, .txt. Look at that. Coolio. And we can still load that original file and still save it. Okay, I said I was going to show you a better way to do the buttons, so let's go ahead and do that. When we're creating our buttons, we essentially just need a label. By default, within the arguments, this is where you put just the text label. But if we want it to be a little bit more clear to the user, we can actually create a custom label for our buttons. So I'll show you on the save note, and you can apply it to the rest if you'd wish. So we create our button just like we did before, But this time within the brackets, we can include an action. So what action do I want? Well, I'm going to call upon my save note. We don't need to include the parameters here. We then add our braces, and then this is where we can include our label. From here, we can include a title. So I want it to be save. And then outside of the string, we can add a comma, and we can do a system image. Now the system images, they are declared with a string value, and you can find them by doing Command-Shift+L on your keyboard. And that's going to bring up the object library. Now the star symbol all the way on the right shows the symbol library. These are called SF symbols, and they are great symbols that scale perfectly and are very universally recognizable. So for the save, why don't we do something, we can even scroll or we can search for something. I want something to kind of signify to the user that's going to save. I do like this square design, but I also want it to have an arrow. So I'm going to do the square dot and arrow. Ooh, and look at this one with the down. I'm going to select this one. So you can either double click and it'll go where you were recently highlighting, or you can drag and drop. The only thing is these are a string value, so they need to be wrapped in quotation marks. Outside of the button, I also like to add a dot button style. And my favorite is the dot bordered prominent. Now we can either load the preview or we can run the app again. If you're not going to be doing any testing with the saving, preview is totally fine. I just don't have my preview loading, as sometimes when I'm recording, it may cause my camera or screen to freeze. Okay, and we can see here now with the border prominent, it stands out with that accent color, and we have that nice little save with the indicator that that's going to be happening. So you might want to play around with these, add some more cool button styles. But that is it for the core of File I/O in SwiftUI, which is the foundation of data persistence. You've just built your first macOS app that actually writes to the disk. Next, we'll expand upon this into JSON and codable structs to manage multiple notes. So dream big, code bigger, and we'll see you in the next one.